Jeff from UniSC to get us started. So Jeff is the team leader for the Careers and Employability team.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate an audience anytime I get to talk. As Belinda said, there's a lot of change in our sector, particularly with regard to financial situations, and obviously there's some recent legislation which is pertinent to what I'll be talking about regarding how SAF is spent or distributed to our student guilds and student-led organisations. So I'll be talking about a recent review, the sector review that we have completed, but I'll start at the start, I guess, which is why we decided to do this. We were voluntold to do this. So we were voluntold that we should be preparing a bit of a sector scan on student representation by our DVCA because of that legislation and the way that the funding models are changing. Currently, our representation, our student voice framework is majority SAF funded. So with the potential of losing quite a bit of money out of the university's pool of SAF that we can spend, we've been told to look across the board at how we can more effectively spend that. And as a part of that, our DVCA has asked for a review of the representation at University of the Sunshine Coast to be completed this year. I can't share our actual scan. I do have it up and I'll share like a page or two, but I can't share all of it because we haven't actually gotten permission to distribute it. The people who are doing the scan haven't been provided with the information yet. So there's a few things, reasons why I can't share the whole thing, but I will share with you a page or two which reflects UniSC. The features surrounding UniSC's representation model, which you might have heard before. Okay, so that's kind of the why. So we really wanted to provide an overview of the higher education sector and how student representation is funded. And we got that, I guess, how did we do that? We got that through just publicly available information. So looking on university websites, looking at publications and student guild websites, annual reports, things like that. So it was all publicly available information. A couple of universities we reached out to individually when we couldn't really find much or we had specific questions that we wanted to ask them, but primarily it all came from publicly available info. Okay, and as we know, or I guess intrinsically we know that models differ amongst universities. We're not all the same. We're all different. We all have different ways of doing things, even when we're given the same scope to operate in, we all do things slightly differently. So it was really interesting to actually have a look and see how things are done differently in different organisations. So talk a little bit more our approach. We were asked to do a scan, as I said, by the DVCA, and they limited us or set some boundaries, which was good, but the boundaries really were just student numbers. So they said between 17,000 and 30,000 students. And we sit a bit towards the lower end of that now. We've got roughly 20,000 headcount of students. So we're looking around the same ballpark of student numbers. And that was all the scope we were given. So we thought, we'll take that, we'll have a look. And I think there's about 11 or 12 universities in Australia that fall within that. And then we looked at what kind of factors might influence engagement with student representation. And these might not be all the factors that influence student engagement. We had a look at a couple of them, looked at some literature, and it was quite difficult to find literature on that topic. But what we did find, and there's a lot of US literature on it, which is interesting. What we did find is there are a couple of positive influences. So base location of the university being metropolitan was a positive influence. Higher levels of undergraduate students was a positive influence. More full-time and more international students. And gender bias towards female was a positive influence on whether students would engage in representation within their institution. Negative influences, Obviously, we've got undergraduate, full-time, and gender. So the opposite of that was a negative influence, more postgrad students, part-time students, male-dominated cohorts were negative influences on whether students would engage in representation. Others were online, and non-metro based universities and low SES. So those are some of the influences we found. And from there, what we did is we looked at those 11 or 12 universities and we built like a bit of a matrix and a bit of a table building in those influences, the positive, negative influences, and a couple of other things built in there as well to decide what universities we'll focus on, because we didn't want to focus on all 12 universities. Excuse me. So what we did then was build a bit of a matrix. We identified universities that had similar makeups and build-ups within their cohort to University of the Sunshine Coast by percentage of undergraduates, online, postgraduate, that kind of thing, percentage genders, percentage full-time, percentage of undergraduate versus postgraduate versus HDR students, and built in that matrix and highlight a couple of universities which were similar, a couple of universities that could be used as a contrast, so quite different student demographics and student populations there, and then a couple of just outliers, not outside universities, outlying universities, where the cohort was like completely different. So we built in that and we came up with 7 universities that we decided to go into more of a deep dive to look at what their student representation consisted of and how they ran it. So when we were looking at what or how universities ran their student representation, we also broke that down into 4 different features. So we broke that down into institutional features, so university policy and strategy, which is basically, was there anything defined in university policy? Was there anything defined in in university strategy, which would give an example of or provide in that strategy or policy for student representation at that university? So exactly what is in that policy? Does it allow for a certain number of elected students on a particular council or board, or does it allow for different types of things? So that was one part of it. Another part was independent student-led organisations. So that's more focused on guilds and unions. So how are they set up? Are they body corporates? Are they incorporated? Are board members elected? Are they nominated? Is there any remuneration or incentive? Are students put on a sabbatical from studies? Are they paid? Is there honorariums? All of that kind of stuff. What kind of training and support is available for guild board members and committee members? And the third one was student voice and partnerships. So how is that delivered into the university? So we took a voice separate to actual representation. So student voice models. So is there a student representative council? At University of Sunshine Coast, we have a number of different tier level groups representing different cohorts, which feed up into different level and then into the student senate, which is advisory to council. So what kind of models do other universities have with that? And then again, similar to the guild or unions, what's the voting process? Are students nominated? What kind of training and support? And are there specific approaches to underrepresented voices? So for example, First Nations or students with a disability or international students or whatever it might be. So what kind of strategy or approach is there towards that? The fourth part of the review looked at student representation within student governance. So obviously looking at council, University Council. Are students elected into those? Are they nominated to those? Do they have to specifically come from another area of representation within the university? Again, any incentives or remuneration for being on those types of boards? What other committees or boards are there? So academic board, education committees, those kinds of things. And again, specific strategy or approaches to underrepresented voices. So those are the 4 things that we kind of focused on. I had some notes and now I've lost them. That's great. Anyway, so that's kind of what we did in our approach to doing this representation scan. And I might share with you now. Yep, you should all be able to see here on my screen just the start of the University of the Sunshine Coast, how we actually broke that down. So we created these big tables, which took forever to fill in and forever to find information on other universities. Luckily, it was quite easy to find our own, thank goodness. But it just gives you an idea about what I was just speaking about with the 4 domains: institutional features, independent student-led organisations in the green there, orange student voice committees / partnership models, and down the bottom there, if we go down to the blue, the university governance, so how students are appointed, elected, what kind of boards they sit on. So obviously this is not completely comprehensive. We did our best to fill these tables in for the universities we wanted to compare and contrast UniSC to. But as I said, all of it was taken from publicly available information, and we reached out to a couple of universities. So it's not going to be, an absolute representation of what it looks like at the universities across Australia, but it did highlight to us, some of the differences in models and where different universities did things differently, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure really what else I can say about that at this point, but that's what we did. As I said, this is to be provided to an external organisation that's running a review on student representation at University of the Sunshine Coast, which is due to start fairly soon. So maybe after that has run, we might be able to get permission to share this more broadly and maybe share it with the group. I'm not sure. I'll talk to Belinda about that once we get through the review. But are there any questions on that? Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, or comments for me?
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, thank
happy
goodness.
to. People are here. Happy to take any questions. That was a really good overview of the process that you went through and how you identified the different categories to review. My understanding is the review's a little bit behind where we thought it would be at this stage. So we're hoping to be able to present a little bit more of the findings at this session, but because it hasn't been approved, it got a little bit of a roadblock on that. But
sorry.
No, that's all right. Well, once that's all finished, with over the next month or 2, I think is the plan, we might be able to, hopefully SVA can share that more broadly. Kelly, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for that, Jeff, and well done for a big job pulling all of this together. It looks massive.
I can't say it was just me. It definitely wasn't just me who did this.
And I'm a little bit envious that you're at the position where you've got obviously a fairly robust and existing structure to then start making some comparisons, because I'm at Murdoch University in Perth, and I feel like we're still we're in the process of doing our own internal review of all these moving parts, and couldn't possibly get my head around comparing that to others. I'm also reflecting that so much of what we do internally here is not communicated publicly for you to even access if you were looking at Murdoch for a comparison. So that's something we're working on. I guess two things. One is, are there any sort of, without divulging things that you're not allowed to divulge just yet, any immediate sort of reflections or findings or aha moments that were either validating or concerning that you can share, or at least just reveal that yes, there were, or no, there weren't? And the only other question comment, I suppose, is that obviously this is an amazing starting point, and wouldn't it be great if we had a more of a national kind of approach and review to this sort of thing, so we can, you know, using the categories that you've already started to have a really good deep dive into what's working, and you know, every university likes a bit of competition, right, to try and get better at what we do. So to be able to demonstrate that and lobby my own internal powers that be that, look, this is getting good mileage and support in such and such a university, you know, how about we try it here, sort of thing.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. Aha moments, there were a couple, and but to be honest, I had to, after we did this, I had to just leave it for a while. So I haven't looked at it for a little while, but the aha moment's more focused around the university's influence on the students who are in those representative roles, or the students who are in guild roles, and how that might play out. Some universities, it appeared that the university itself actually had quite a deal of influence on how students would undertake representative roles. So we at UniSC have the framework set up, and it's quite a mature model, as you might have heard in previous meetings, but the actual influence that the executive of the university has on our student representatives is quite low, whereas it appeared that in some universities it was quite high, which is an interesting moment, because it's the student voice, not the university trying to control, the university trying to deeply influence the student voice. So I found that interesting. And another university, the advocacy arm of a student guild or a student union appeared to be done through the university staff as well, which I found really interesting. Those are just two things that I can remember off the top of my head, having not been in it for a little while. The second point about it'd be good if we could share this more broadly and have something that universities could compare nationally. I think Belinda might be able to comment more on that, but I certainly agree with you there that there's not really any secrets here, so we should be able to share and collaborate, and because we're not all going to be the same, and even if we share and collaborate, this knowledge of how each university does its student representation, you know, it's not commercial in confidence. It's not something that's going to give a university a competitive advantage, having seen another university's model. I don't think, anyway.
Well,
but isn't there plans for that, Belinda?
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all, right? So
exactly, yeah. There's so many different moving parts to universities that one model's not going to be the same as another model, even for a similar institution.
And Kelly, I think my main reflections, because I did contribute to the review as well, was the lack of clarity around how institutions are defining student representation, and it rarely sat within policies or procedures, which most are should be publicly available. So if it was in policy procedures, we did find a few examples where that was really clear around the different aspects of what student representation looks like at those institutions. But from an SVA perspective, that's definitely something I would love to prioritise. I'd love to be able to clearly share that across our member institutions in terms of what's happening across the sector. A way that I've started to do that is through our members master list. So I'm going to share that in the chat at the end of today's session. I only published it maybe like 2 months ago, and that's just asking members to tell us a quick overview about what you're doing and how you're doing it. There's some optional fields around the resources that you have to support the activities that you're doing, where your team sits structurally and that kind of thing. So that's available on the members portal for SVA members, and I think there's about half of our members who filled that out at this stage. So I'll get that up in a second. I'll share it in the chat at the end of today's session as well. So that can be a resource we can refer to.
Sorry, I just shared another page, Belinda. I didn't mean to.
That's right.
So this is a little table from our report. There was somebody in the chat put in asking if we could recap positive and negative influences. As I said, we couldn't find a lot of literature on this, could we, Belinda? So it was sparse, and a lot of the literature focused more on the US and participation in elections. So we had to filter out participation in general or political elections from university elections for representatives, but we did actually find some. But the table's there. So positive influence, metro, undergraduate, full-time, female or other gender, and international students meant students were more likely to engage in student representation and voting for student representation at a university. And obviously the negative influences there. So again, this isn't going to be an exhaustive list of influencing factors here. It was what we could find in the time frame that we had to look.
Thank you. And yeah, if there's anything anyone else thinks of in terms of questions throughout the next half an hour, put it in the chat for Jeff to review. But thank you very much, Jeff, for joining and sharing what you can at this stage. So for the last half an hour, I'm going to put us in breakout rooms so we can have just a little bit more of a discussion around sharing what's going on in your institutions at the moment. So I've got 3 questions to help guide us, and then understand our numbers might go from 20 to 10 as everyone leaves and goes, I don't want to talk to people. That's all right. But would love if you can stay. If we can focus on a review process. So sharing, if you have recently undergone an internal or external review, what did that look like for you? What was the challenges you came up across, and if you can share anything to your peers around what that looks like. Secondly, what's changing, like what trends or shifts are you seeing at your institution that you can share with others? And then future focus, if there's areas that you would like SVA to also support you in terms of training, support and professional development and future focus. So if it's 11:30 now, I'll give us 15 minutes in the breakout rooms. And then if you can just assign one person from the group to do a quick recap when you come back to the room of the key themes that you discussed, that would be amazing. Actually, I haven't done breakout rooms in Teams before, so let's see how I go. Just press create breakout rooms. It's thinking. Open. Go. Open. So see you in 15 minutes.
BB.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at it.
No one in
I
our
know,
room can
I know,
talk.
I know.
You've got us muted.
I know. Well, I don't have you muted. I'm just going in the settings now and like turning that off.
Yeah, I was like the only one
hold
who
on.
could talk.
All right. I don't know why it's done that.
Maybe in the settings. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
going to
you've, like,
settings, meeting
muted
options.
Yeah.
I haven't muted anyone. Hold on. All right, let's just close it all then. All right. Yep, let's come
Yeah, I
back.
didn't particularly want to be the only one talking. It was a bit awkward.
So why does it work for you? It's a bit strange.
I don't know.
Oh.
But yeah, there we go. Now we're all talking.
Belinda's wrecked it.
I just didn't want anyone to
Broke it.
talk. It was a challenge. It was a silent breakout room. Okay. To like do
That's a
sign
classic.
language.
We're in a student voice meeting and you've taken our voices
No
away.
voice. Oh my gosh. I've
Smooth.
never experienced that. Sorry, guys. I went to settings. I couldn't find anything. So maybe it's a uni SQ thing, or maybe it's a me thing. So apologies. Let's just have a big group chat and see how we go. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Sounds good. Well, good.
Yeah. So who wants to start with? Let's start with like external reviews. Is anyone, or internal reviews? Has anyone had a review recently?
We're in the thick of an internal review. I'll just put that out there. And I'm curious as to what sort of organisations you go to for external review, what their experience or remit and kind of what industry are they coming from? If is it, are they, HRE like governance focused or higher ed sector focused? But yeah, we're just doing internal at the moment, looking to tighten, as you pointed out earlier, Jeff, some of the, or maybe it was yourself, Belinda, the getting some clarity around how an institution defines and acknowledges and endorses, through a policy or procedure, the student voice kind of mechanisms. So early days for us.
And Jeff, do you know who the external reviewer is at this stage?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I actually don't know. I haven't been given a name yet. I meet them in 10 days, but I haven't even been given a name yet. I don't think they're actually locked in. There's a preferred provider that our associate director and director are in conversation with at the moment to lock in, but there's been preliminary meetings set for myself and my associate director to meet with them. So I don't know a name yet, unfortunately.
And yeah, I have someone that I know 3 institutions recently went through, so I'll find their site now and I'll put it in the chat, but I don't have any personal experience with them. Sorry if anyone can't unmute. Like maybe if you put your hand up, I'll try and... So Alicia, yeah, so let's see if I can go unmute. I can't. I can go spotlight for everyone, but I can't unmute you manually.
Linda, I had the issue and I jumped out and jumped back in and now I'm not muted. So I'm just I'm not going to put the mute on again. So if I don't know if that will go on. If you can't do it, it did work. It reset mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Liz, you've got KPMG starting an internal review with you.
Yeah, it's very early days. We've just handed them a bunch of documents and they're just about to start all of the meetings with stakeholders. We've given them a big list. So we'll see how that goes.
And do you know what the process will look like? Will it be like interviews or is it reports that they're submitting through that review process?
A combination of both. So they've started gathering as much documentation as is available. And so we're just basically drowning them in documents at the moment, and then they're setting up interviews. We've given them a list of stakeholders that we'd like them to talk to, different committees and boards across the university, and ask that they reach out to discuss their practices so that we can start to understand what everybody's doing.
Yeah. I'm still in the settings trying to sort out the chat thing. And the second question was around what's changing. So are you seeing specific trends or shifts in your institution? Could be related to funding streams. Obviously, we know there's a lot of changes to the SAF legislation that's having impact on independent student-led organisations, and that's impacting some institutions that didn't already have those established. Anyone like to share if they can? Unmute. Melissa.
I'm happy to share. I'm from the University of Wollongong, and I guess like others, we've done quite a bit of internal review, but it's concurrent to the transformation that's occurring at the university, and so there has been a lot of movement of the different representation, voice, and associations, and like everyone, and thanks for acknowledging it, Jeff. You know, the universities are so diverse and different, and have such unique factors that play into it, and ours is no different. Probably the biggest thing that's changing is around the leads on all of these spaces, and kind of reconceptualizing kind of who leads representation, what does student elections, who does the EOIs, who does the formal representation, and what SAF looks like. And so that's been a really interesting time for us, really probably challenging, or even sometimes getting why things ended up in different places, what that looks like as the university transforms. So yeah, I'm super interested to understand if those things are really separate in different universities. And I don't know, Jeff, if that's something that came up as part of your sector scan, or whether we do have anywhere that's kind of become a hub doing all of those things and coordinating it. But yeah, that's been a really big thing for us. And we're not quite at the end of that transformation yet, so it's still ongoing.
Did you want to share, Jeff, what's the... Yeah, so at all I can reflect, are you able to unmute? Who knows? Yeah, so at UniSC, there's student representation in the guild or union as well as run centrally. And yeah, in conversations I've had with institutions, I think it's either both or only in the unions or guilds. And there seems to be, with the institutions who were impacted by that legislation change to SAF, a view to wanting to transition it to independent associations to meet the legislation. And has that resulted in any changes for you at UOW yet, Melissa, or so you just coming to the end of that process?
Yeah, we're probably on a bit of an evolving model at the moment. So we have kind of a central group now, which I think will be rebadged something like student relations. And so we oversee the SAF piece, but also then the university's representatives elected and EOI in different formal committees and groups, and then the relationship with the associations and support for them. But as I said, we've got quite a different model in terms of our associations employing entities. They don't have any revenue streams. So it is quite a different model. And then one of the things I'm probably most interested in is student elections, not only for the associations, but for your internal. And that's one of the ones that where we've just sort of started to do as well. So it's sort of, we're finding we're almost moving into a bit of a hub model, but we also do a lot of insights work with the big student surveys. So that's interesting too, in a student voice perspective, looking at how we feed that information through to our representatives in a way that's not influencing, but just provides them with that information. So yeah, so it's a bit of a moving beast, I think. And so, yeah, there has absolutely been changes in the last 12 months, but I think it's not where we're going to end.
Thanks for sharing, Melissa. And Nikita.
Thanks, Belinda. From the University of Sydney, I think it's been interesting to hear, because in our space, we obviously don't have any direct sort of stake in the Student Representative Council or the postgrad equivalent, nor the Student Guild either. So they're completely separate entities. So I think what we've seen over the last few years in our space is the creation of student partnership staff roles, and then in turn, obviously, quite a number of paid roles for students in terms of directly being involved in program co-design and advising on certain issues. And I'd say at our central sort of piece, very few sort of volunteer opportunities. They've all quite remunerated positions. I guess in terms of trends and those sort of pieces, I feel that there's been quite an uptick in engagement this year. And among the office, it's kind of across everything from my area, which is more sort of the co-curricular programs, all through to like the representation pieces. And we've just guessed, but we assume because these students, you know, had a year 12, they had a year 11, they had a year 10, and they weren't sort of confined to their screens in COVID. The days of, you know, trying to encourage students to come to campus that were prominent sort of 21, 22, they're sort of a bit behind us. The students are here, they just need a reason to stay, is kind of what we've guessed. So interested to hear if that's the same thing, but definitely from the voice perspective, I think by nature of not having the guild and the sort of representation, governance, student-facing pieces within the university sort of student life space and them being so independent, we've created the spaces as well for those students.
Thanks for sharing. And so further to what Melissa was mentioning around interested to know more about elections, how that process works, whether they're university-wide or run within associations. Does anyone have experience with running elections? What does that look like at your institution? Alicia.
Haley.
It's actually Haley, but hi.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, that's really
and Haley.
Hi. We confuse everyone by joining all meetings together. So we're at La Trobe Uni, by the way, in Victoria. Coming from a background of civics and citizenship education, and then coming into universities and learning somewhat the lack of education around elections and how elections can work and don't work, and maybe why they're not the best tool for representation as well, is fun when that's what the government's decided to put into legislation. Yeah, it's been a fun one, but learning, I think, the different, like whether or not you're running the election internally yourself, or if you're getting an external group to run it, I think is the biggest one. We have a couple of different ways elections are run at La Trobe, both within our student union and student association, and then throughout the university. They all use the same, actually, most of them use the same software platform, but then we look at ones run internally. That's our actual like university council and academic board elections. And then we ran elections this year for our new student council, which will be an internal representative body for students. And we had an external run that, so there could be no kind of looking at if the university was influencing it or not. And yes, it is Big Pulse. We all use Big Pulse. Good times. But ours was run by a consultant and then also used Big Pulse. And they also tend to do a lot of elections for a lot of universities. So you might all also know OGL. They do that. And then one of our student associations uses a different company, which we'll have to find for you.
Find it for you.
My main thing is understanding and for people to unpack what tools they're using to ensure representation through elections. I know traditionally at universities, it seems to be on having particular positions for particular cohorts, which is one way of doing things. I liked to throw a spanner in the works and talked about quotas, and we went through a quota system. So after voting, we then look at, okay, do we have someone that can bring the experience of, is that one of our regional campuses and all these different ones, rather than relying on one person to represent an entire cohort of people. And our other focus then in terms of representation is that instead of viewing our student representatives as individuals who know every single thing about students, we support them to go consult consistently with students. to understand that, because I found that's a big thing at La Trobe in particular. They're just like, well, we have one student and they'll know everything. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not how people work, but we can work on that. So that's been our big thing with elections this year, is really that education piece around what it all means, and also pointing out sometimes to people that if you don't have an engaged and informed voter base, it might not mean much. But if we have to run an election, we have to run an election.
And I'm interested to know more about the quotas and how they were decided or developed, because you mentioned regional, but obviously I assume the list could be quite long. How did you prioritize that? What did that process look like?
Yeah, so I know that the cohorts themselves, I think, came from who came up with those cohorts, but it is listed as priorities for La Trobe because of our weird
some of the equity
settings.
measures in reporting is where some of those came from. And we are very spread out across Victoria, so that regional piece is really important to us. We're also looking at
international students who
live on res. We identified that our clubs and societies aren't really represented formally anywhere within those structures, so there's also a place for a president of one of our clubs as well. Am I missing?
And then
HDR as
high degree by research students is a big one, because we do find, and I'm sure you all find this, often those students don't even see themselves as students, or there's a weird grey area where they're treated half as students, half as staff, and miss out on all the good things of both. So that's been a big one. As well, I think we also looked at mature age students, which is a massive cohort based on that age cutoff of 24. But yeah, kind of looking at those for us, because we are getting this up and running, our most important thing is that we didn't actually want to go through the process of just having so many gaps to fill, because our first problem is trying to get students to run for something brand new that they're also going to then co-design, so they don't really know what they're doing. So we went with the quota system so that we could have those gaps filled, but then also with the intent, as the student council develops, supporting those students to understand when it comes to particular cohorts and equity priorities, that electing those positions is never going to be the best way to engage them. And so looking at, is there certain positions and certain representation that we do want to work with in different ways, rather than just electing everyone to these roles? Do we need to have different committees that focus on these things, all that sort of stuff?
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, can I say thank you so much? That's so interesting. I know we can see Alicia's name. What was, I missed your name.
Sorry, I'm Hayley.
Hi, Hayley. Thank you so much for that info. And interesting that that's your background as well, and the lens that you bring to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, my background is student voice in primary and secondary education. So then the civics piece often comes alongside that. So then it's been interesting coming into higher ed and seeing kind of the differences and helping shift some of the knowledge from primary and secondary school. Because again, even with Jeff's talking about those positive influences, it's the same things we see in schools. It's very, well, except for the regional piece, I will say regional schools are often more, like, students are more engaged in representation because there's much more of a community vibe. But a lot of the other stuff was very much aligned with what we see in schools for this work.
Did anyone else want to share any experiences or reflections with elections? Otherwise, we'll move to future focus in terms of the areas that SVA can support you in your current student voice activity. So we've already spoken about the value of an annual, like a comprehensive sector scan and resource, and that's absolutely on my list to do. I'd love to see that as just an annual survey that you can expect from us. I know that's what they do in the UK, and they get really good responses. So you probably would recall we did a survey, a national survey recently around reward and recognition initiatives. So we received 14 responses to that nationally. So we've got enough data to be able to present back to the network, probably at the Student Voice Symposium, but also in a report method as well. So thank you to everyone who took time to respond to that. But I guess with that comes the time it takes to complete these surveys, and we would hope that my goal for designing the next one, if it was a sector scan one, was to make it quite low entry, not take too much of your time, so that we can gather as much data as we can to share with the network, because we did receive a lower response rate than we were hoping for the National Reward and Recognition one. That's all good. Kate has to head. So besides that, I've noted that as like something that you'd really like to see from SVA. Is there future focus areas that you would like this network to focus on, and or SVA to support you with? Or are we just nailing it? We're just doing everything. I'll just take it. Let's take that.
Belinda, I'd say that just even that question that I asked about Big Pulse, it's like I'm learning about all these things, but just that, and a few people have shared different groups that they work with, kind of groups that we work with directory. Because I mean, you know, even from that perspective, when I first heard of OGL and Big Pulse and things like that, it would have been great for me to be able to jump in and be like, oh, I can see that they're actually on the list that like maybe at least one other person is using, because it felt like a bit of a black hole to start with.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's always, you can go in with a bit more confidence when you're working with an external provider, having known another institution who's worked with them, hopefully with good experiences. Well, I'm going to share the link to our members portal that has the master list on there for you. I'm just trying to find that at the moment. I'd also like to highlight that our Student Voice Symposium and our Student Summit is coming up at the end of October at Griffith Gold Coast campus, and it will be online accessible as well. Registration's opening ASAP by tomorrow. I've just got to press the publish button and waiting for one more approval from a keynote presenter. But I am able to share that our keynote presenter for the Student Summit and a spotlight presenter at the symposium on the second day will be Sarah Bendel from the National Student Ombudsman. And our keynote for the symposium will be Professor Carolyn Bruckert, who is the Dean of Employability at Griffith University and has done some really influential research in the student voice space. You'll also get an email from me hopefully tomorrow, like within the next few days, around the student grants that are available from SVA to promote accessibility for students to travel to those events, as well as the process for your complimentary tickets. So as members, you get 2 free in-person tickets for each students and staff across both of those days. So I've almost got that ready to send out. It will be a big long email, so excuse all the info, but just flagging that's coming soon. If you can keep an eye out for it, we'd love to see as much people as possible in person for great networking opportunities at the end of October. And if you applied to present, the organising committee is currently shortlisting and we'll get back to people by the end of the month as well. So we might be able to wrap it up a little bit prior to the hour, so you can have a break if you've got back-to-back meetings. If anyone wants to stay around and ask me any SVA specific questions, apologies about the audio issues that some people couldn't actually talk. I'll do some testing and figure out why that happened for next time. Otherwise, thank you so much, Jeff, for presenting and everyone for contributing, and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Belinda.
Thanks, Belinda.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me, Belinda.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.